He is a seasoned veteran in sports media. I'm talking to the great Jim Chiappelli. He is general manager of Dirt Vision. They are an OTT streaming service where they put on television broadcast for racing on dirt tracks. And Jim has such an incredible story because he's worked with Speed, he's worked with Fox, he's worked in the local television division as well. And the basis of this conversation is to learn about his rise, learn about his persistence in the business, his talents, but also learn about him as a family man as well. This is the On to Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. Jim, I appreciate you doing this. And one of the things I wanted to ask you first was, I noticed that you have such a love for traveling, and you and your family over the years have gone on some really neat vacations. You touring through the rainforests of Australia. Set the scene for that.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Bryan. Traveling is a big part of my life later. And it was because of my parents who gave me the advice, don't wait until you're too old to do this. So my wife and I have been very blessed to do a lot of great travels, and going through the Australia, through the rainforest, and my family went to the Great Barrier Reef, and we were in Sydney for New Year's. The rainforest was a rainforest. It was very tropical. It was like Hawaii. Didn't have any particular adventures, but it was very eye-opening.
Adventures would be something that we've seen over and over again from you in your career. And at a very early age, you started to watch dirt track races. You grew up, if I'm not mistaken, in Pennsylvania, and that's where you were able to feast your eyes on what this sport is all about. What about it initially captivated the child version of Jim Chiappelli?
It was Indianapolis Motor Speedway, because my dad, as a second generation mechanic, that was his love. He loved Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I was the youngest of 6 kids, too young to go to the track. So he would bring home these programs and newspapers from the Indianapolis Star, and I just immersed myself in the Indy 500. And of course, back in the day, the Indy 500, the path to Indy was through dirt racing, through sprint cars and midgets, and so it became a love and a passion. My brother started dirt track racing, and it just caught like fire, and it became a family thing for us.
It became a family thing, but then where did the family or sibling rivalry come in? And you mentioned your brother was involved, your dad as well. So what was it about the way in which you did things where you tried to create your own way and sort of your own path in the business to separate yourself from them in a way?
For a while, I was the annoying little brother, the annoying teenage kid that thought that he could outdo his dad and outdo his brother. And so I was very arrogant, and I jumped in my dad's car and I said, I'll show you how to run this thing. I ended up putting into a wall, got a concussion. I had to have reconstructive surgery on my face. And I realized maybe my career path isn't driving. So I'm going to go behind the scenes, went to journalism school and always wanted to be involved in sports. And then it just came full circle for me.
In a way, you're behind the wheel of some really great racing properties. You might not physically be behind the wheel, but the thrill that somebody might get on a high-speed dirt track in being the driver, how do you find that what you're doing now, while you're not technically in front of the wheel of a race car, you still feel that adrenaline and that excitement and the ways in which you're able to see the parallels there?
Oh, you nailed it. It is an adrenaline rush. And the adrenaline rush that we got in the control room as a producer or a coordinating producer and being part of a live broadcast, it translates to being part of a team and an adrenaline-fueled sport like dirt track racing. And it's, as you said, the parallels are there, and we're just trying to entertain people and trying to give them that experience. There's nothing like being at the track, but if you can't get to the track, we provide a good alternative, and we take you behind the scenes and talk to drivers and try to tell their stories.
What is one story from a driver that is inspirational to you and to others? And I know there's got to be a lot of them out there, but just kind of learning about those, even who you work with, where somebody could say, wow, that's really cool, and what they were able to persevere through.
Wow, that's like asking me to choose among the stars in the sky. There really are so many good stories out there, and it's always the underdog story. And maybe I don't know a person, I'm not going to put a name to the person, but it's always the person who was told you can't do this, or you're not good enough, or you don't have enough money. And it's the people who work the 18 hours a day to make it happen. And that's where dirt track racing is different than the, say, Formula One or NASCAR. It's all money driven. And dirt track, it's talent based. And these people, they race to live. And it's a hard life, and they're working to get to that. Some make a very good living at dirt track racing. Others are trying to climb that ladder. So the underlying story is that it's always an underdog story, and we're always cheering for the next big thing, and we're always trying to latch on to who's the next Jeff Gordon, who's the next Tony Stewart, who's the next Kyle Larson. And there are thousands of young men and women out there trying to climb the ranks, and so we're just trying to tag along for the ride.
In taking what you just said and then turning it to you, in what way, Jim, do you think you have an underdog story, and that people have said you can't do this, and you found a way consistently to do that?
I'm very humbled by your question. The youngest of 6 kids. I grew up poor in Western Pennsylvania, but we didn't know we were poor because we were well taken care of. And typical small mining town affected by layoffs and high unemployment and high inflation. And I managed to climb out of that. And that's no slight against anybody in a small town. It's just I had different dreams. And I was very naive. And I never thought that I would get to the places that I went. I dreamed about going to Indianapolis Motor Speedway or to Daytona International Speedway. And here I am being in Victory Lane. I have all access passes, and I'm, when I was at Speed, I had Indy 500 winners in my office and interviewing for, a job as a racing analyst. So to see how far I've come, given where I started, it's a dream come true for a, little boy in a small town from Western Pennsylvania.
If you were, and going back to that boy in a small town in Western Pennsylvania, if you were to tell yourself back then that one day you would be in an office with Indy 500 winners, what is that boy going to think and feel at that moment?
It's unimaginable, because I had, dreams of someday being a driver. And when I knew that wasn't going to happen, well, then I turned to the other side of the sport. And I just have to pinch myself because I'm so lucky. I've been surrounded by good people who gave me opportunities, gave me a chance. And I've been able to share that with my family, and they've helped me with the ride. But to tell my 10-year-old self that, I would never have believed it.
How does your family show itself in rooting for you in what you're doing?
Oh, mercy. Well, I lost both my parents have since passed, but they were so proud of all their kids. And being the youngest, you learn from the mistakes and achievements of the older siblings. And I get a lot of inspiration from my brother Tom, who was a driver that I was always annoying. And when his driving days were done, he and his wife Fran kept the wheels turning. They now own a sprint car team in central Pennsylvania. And so I'm always connected to those roots. And even though I was able to cover Formula One and NASCAR and IndyCar and motorcycles and drag racing, I always came back to the dirt tracks. And that's something that when I was at Speed and Fox, I always made sure the little guy was represented, that I always gave dirt track racing a seat at the table.
And that you did. When you run into people who their life revolves around dirt track racing and they see the effort, the energy you put in to represent them, how do they show you how much they appreciate you and what you're doing to bolster the sport?
Again, I can't take credit for that. It's something I just do. I go back to being it's very humbling. It's nice to be recognized, but it's that'd be very selfish for me to say that. I appreciate if they recognize that, but a lot of times it goes unnoticed. And I have to choose my words carefully, because a rising tide raises all ships. And so we cheer for the success of others. We cheer for the success of other forms of motorsport and other forms of sports entertainment. So we can be part of that and all rise together.
It seems that whatever you're a part of, Jim, that others, you rise up others, as you mentioned, along. You're very much an empowering presence in the business. And even when things hadn't gone your way, what was it about the way you were able to bounce back? I see this bounce back attitude and mentality from you. Let's say, something doesn't go the right way and you have to make a career pivot. How have you developed such a great bounce back mentality into, say a layoff comes and you're right back at it, how you're able to sort of connect the dots?
It was faith. There was a time in my life when I considered being a Catholic priest. And that, after a period of discernment, that wasn't my calling. So I went on, and everything I do has been faith-based. And so it's being able to gather strength from the people I knew in the past. Maybe it was a teacher, a coach, parent, that were inspiring to me, that encouraged me to keep going. My wife is the biggest influence in my life. She's been my rock, and she's the one who encouraged me to go from this market to that market and to chase my dreams here. And my two daughters, they've been very supportive, because when when you work in sports television, you sacrifice. You work nights and holidays and weekends when the events are happening and others are having a cookout. You sacrifice a lot, and maybe you miss some family events. And a lot of the decisions I've made in my career recently have been family-based, not selfish-based.
You mentioned how many different people that you draw strength from: your children, your wife, friends, family, colleagues. I know you're very humble, and the last thing you want to do, but having you on, I want people to see what a great person you are. And so if you could, where do you feel like people can draw strength in learning about your story, and that you can be that person to help others in that way?
Thank you again for your kind comments. Start small, but dream big, and just have faith in yourself, and rally around. Let the people who rally around you join in. Someone told me once, to succeed in life, you don't have to necessarily have talent, but you have to be able to recognize talent in others. And that's what I've been lucky to do, that I've been able to tag along for the ride and follow one path, and then doors open and you go somewhere else. And it's just, a lot of it is timing, and a lot of it is faith and patience.
And as I wrap up this conversation, talent. And that's something that needs to be added to the conversation for you. You mentioned the faith, the patience, and everything else, but you've got a lot of talent, and the way in which you are able to collaborate with others in an empowering way goes to show you everything that you're a part of has had success. And I look forward to seeing more of what you all are doing with Dirt Vision and the road that you're doing to build up that sport from a small kid in Western Pennsylvania in a small setup neighborhood to what you're doing now, dreaming big, actualizing it, and overcoming so much, being a family man, and being so appreciative of all those who've helped you along the way. This was an opportunity I wanted people to see of why, as much as you appreciate everybody else, Jim, people need to appreciate you. Jim, I'm Bryan Fenley. Really appreciate the conversation. Thanks so much for making the time.